What if the greatest lesson of your life did not come from books, classrooms, or examinations, but from love, loss, and inner silence? What if a teacher of English literature discovered that the deepest truths of life cannot be taught, only lived? In today's video, we explore The English Teacher by R.K. Narayan, a novel that begins as a simple academic story and gradually transforms into a deeply emotional and spiritual journey. This is not merely a story of a teacher, it is a story of human awakening. By the end of this video, you'll clearly understand the novel's plot, characters, themes, narrative technique, and exam relevant interpretations, all explained in a structured and student friendly manner. The author R.K. Narayan is one of the most important figures in Indian writing in English. Along with Mulk Raj Anand and Raja Rao, he laid the foundation for Indian English fiction. Unlike writers who focused heavily on politics or nationalism, Narayan focused on ordinary Indian life, its simplicity, irony, humor, and emotional depth. Most of Narayan's novels are set in the fictional town of Malgudi, which functions almost like a living character. Through Malgudi, Narayan represents the middle class Indian experience with remarkable realism. The English Teacher, published in 1945, is Narayan's most personal novel. It is semi autobiographical, inspired by the death of his wife, Rajam. Because of this personal connection, the novel is more serious and emotionally intense than his other works. Here, humor gives way to reflection, grief, and spiritual questioning. To understand The English Teacher, we must place it in its historical and cultural context. The novel was written during British colonial rule in India. English education at the time was rigid, exam oriented, and disconnected from Indian life and emotions. Teachers taught poetry and philosophy, but often lived mechanically without personal fulfillment. At the same time, Indian philosophy emphasized spirituality, inner realization, and the continuity of the soul. Narayan brings these two worlds together, Western rational education and Indian spiritual thought, and shows their conflict within a single individual. Thus, the novel becomes both a critique of colonial education and a philosophical exploration of love, death, and self realization. The novel is narrated in the first person by Krishna, a young lecturer in English at Albert Mission College in Malgudi. At the beginning, Krishna lives a dull and repetitive life. His job involves teaching English literature, and he is a poet himself, but he feels emotionally disconnected from both literature and life. Krishna's routine existence changes when his wife Sushila and their small daughter Leela come to live with him. Their arrival brings warmth, laughter, and emotional richness into his life. For the first time, Krishna experiences true happiness through his family life. Simple moments, playing with his daughter, talking with his wife, sharing meals becomes meaningful. However, tragedy strikes when Sushila falls ill after contracting typhoid during a house hunting visit. Her illness is prolonged and painful. Krishna watches helplessly as his wife suffers. Despite medical treatment, Sushila eventually dies. This loss completely shatters Krishna. He becomes emotionally numb. His teaching feels meaningless. Literature as profession no longer comfort him. Life appears empty and purposeless. At this stage, the novel moves in a new direction. Krishna comes in contact with a spiritual medium or psychic, through whom he begins to communicate with Sushila's spirit. These communications are calm, rational, and deeply comforting. Through them, Krishna learns that love does not end with death. Gradually, Krishna regains emotional balance. Alongside the spiritual healing, he meets a headmaster who runs a small experimental school. This school believes in joy, creativity, freedom, and child centered education, completely opposite to the rigid college system at the Albert Mission College. Inspired, Krishna resigns from his college job and joins the school. The novel ends with Krishna achieving inner peace and spiritual fulfillment, symbolizing his transformation from mechanical existence to meaningful life. The structure of The English Teacher is simple but deeply symbolic. The novel progresses in a linear manner, reflecting the psychological evolution of the protagonist. The plot can be divided into three major phases. First, Krishna's mechanical academic life representing emotional emptiness. Second, domestic happiness followed by devastating loss. Third, spiritual awakening and self realization. This structural movement from outer life to inner life is central to the novel's meaning. Characterization: Krishna, the protagonist, is a sensitive and reflective individual. His character is not heroic in the traditional sense. Instead, he represents the modern educated Indian who struggles to balance intellect and emotion. Sushila, his wife, symbolizes warmth, love, and emotional fulfillment. Though her physical presence is brief, her spiritual presence dominates the novel. Leela, the daughter, represents innocence and continuity of life. The headmaster symbolizes ideal education, natural, joyful, and humane. Narayan's characterization is subtle, realistic, and psychologically convincing. Setting and atmosphere: the novel is set in Malgudi, a fictional South Indian village during the colonial times. The setting shifts between domestic spaces, college classrooms, and the small school. The atmosphere changes throughout the novel. During family life, there is promise, warmth, and happiness. During illness and death, there is silence and sorrow. During spiritual awakening, there is a sense of calmness and serenity that prevails. These shifts reflect Krishna's inner emotional states. The novel is written in the first person narrative, which allows readers to experience Krishna's thoughts and emotions directly. This narrative technique adds authenticity and emotional intensity, especially during the grief and spiritual phases. Major themes in the novel: love and emotional fulfillment. One of the most dominant themes of The English Teacher is love as a source of meaning in human life. At the beginning of the novel, Krishna's life is emotionally barren. He teaches literature, but his own life lacks luster. This changes when his wife, Sushila, and daughter Leela come to live with him. Through simple domestic moments, shared meals, playful conversations, and mutual care, Krishna discovers emotional fulfillment. Narayan suggests that true happiness does not come from professional success or intellectual pursuits, but from human relationships. Importantly, love in the novel is not portrayed as dramatic or romantic, it is quiet and deeply human. This realistic portrayal makes the theme relatable and universal. Love beyond death and spiritual continuity. Closely connected to love is a theme of continuity with beyond physical death. After Sushila's death, Krishna initially collapses emotionally. However, the novel does not end in despair. Through spiritual communication, Krishna realizes that love does not end with the body. Narayan introduces the idea that emotional bonds and spiritual connections transcend death. This theme reflects Indian spiritual philosophy where the soul is eternal and relationships continue on a higher plane of existence. Narayan treats this theme without exaggeration or superstition. The spiritual experiences are calm, rational, and introspective, maintaining psychological realism. This balance makes the theme acceptable even to rational readers. Death as a path to inner growth. In the novel, death is not merely an end, it becomes a transformative experience. Sushila's death destroys Krishna's earlier self but also initiates his spiritual rebirth. Narayan presents suffering as a necessary stage in human development. Krishna's grief strips away his emotional immaturity and intellectual arrogance. Through loss, he learns humility, patience, and deeper awareness. Thus, death functions as a catalyst for self realization, not as a meaningless tragedy. This philosophical treatment of death is one of the novel's most exam relevant features. critique of mechanical and colonial education. Another central theme is Narayan's criticism of the colonial education system. Krishna teaches English literature, yet his teaching is mechanical and lifeless. He himself admits that he does not truly connect with what he teaches. The principal, Mr. Brown, admonishes the English teachers when he finds that the students do not spell English words correctly. Though the other teachers take it lightly, Krishna is angered and asks why the principal has not learned their language even after spending long years in the land. This highlights the prevailing colonial tension in the novel. The college represents rigid discipline, examination pressure, and emotional detachment. In contrast, the headmaster's small school represents true education, which focuses on creativity, freedom, joy, and the natural development of children. Through this contrast, Narayan argues that education should nourish the human spirit and not merely produce clerks. The question on the theme of education frequently appears in university examinations. True education versus false learning. Closely linked to the critique of colonial education is a theme of true versus false learning. False learning, according to the novel, is book centered, exam oriented, and disconnected from life. True education, on the other hand, encourages curiosity, respects individuality, and develops emotional intelligence. Krishna's decision to leave his job to join the headmaster's school symbolizes his rejection of false learning and acceptance of meaningful education. This transformation reflects Narayan's belief that education should shape character and not just careers. Self realization through suffering and inner awakening. At its core, The English Teacher is a novel about self realization. Krishna begins the novel unaware of himself, his emotions, and his purpose. He lives externally, defined by job, routine, and social roles. Through love, loss, suffering, and spiritual reflection, he turns inward. By the end, Krishna achieves inner peace and clarity. This journey from ignorance to awareness mirrors the Indian philosophical idea of self discovery. Thus, the novel can be read as a spiritual Bildungsroman, a novel of inner development. Ordinary life is a source of profound meaning. Another important theme is Narayan's belief that ordinary life contains extraordinary meaning. There are no dramatic events, heroic actions, or grand conflicts in the novel. Instead, Narayan finds depth in family life, teaching, grief, and in silence. This theme reinforces Narayan's realism and humanism. He shows that profound truths are discovered not in extraordinary circumstances but in everyday human experience. Humanism and compassion. Finally, the novel promotes a quiet but powerful humanistic vision. Narayan emphasizes empathy, understanding, and emotional sensitivity. Krishna's growth is not intellectual dominance but emotional maturity. The novel suggests that to be fully human is to feel deeply, suffer honestly, and love selflessly. The question on themes frequently appear in university examinations. Narayan's style is simple, clear, and understated. His language avoids ornamentation but carries deep meaning. Even when dealing with spiritual themes, Narayan remains calm and realistic. To conclude, The English Teacher is not merely a novel about a teacher, it is a meditation on life itself. Through Krishna's journey, Narayan shows that real education lies not in books but in love, suffering, and inner awareness. Be prepared to face questions relating to the content, form, and themes. Remember the following pointers: semi autobiographical novel, three-phase structure, critique of colonial education, and spiritual humanism. If this video helped you understand the novel clearly, subscribe for more exam oriented explanations of English literature. Comment below if you would like important questions, character sketches, or theme wise answers from the novel The English Teacher. Bye for now.